I'm sorry, was that a yes?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Good evening. I'd like to first welcome you to this public hearing, but unfortunately I have to start it off with an apology. I discovered at 9:30 this morning that we had inadvertently set this public hearing at the same time and the same evening as an event associated with the Scotty Montero Jr. Foundation. I was not aware of it. I have already apologized to the foundation. They have graciously accepted my apology. We all have the same goal. They want to stop the violence. We certainly want to stop the violence, and I urge you to support the foundation. So I very much appreciate that you're here, and for those people who chose to be at the foundation event, I completely understand, and hopefully the word will get out about what is said here and what the comments and questions are, and the answers that hopefully we will be able to provide you. Having said that, welcome again, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Rabinovich for a presentation to start off the hearing.
Chairman Sweat, is it okay? I'm going to start with the transportation part and then stop for questions there, and then we'll go into the budget part.
Sounds good.
All right, because I think that's what you had mentioned to Mr. Tatro. Mr. Tatro, do you want to come down with me just so that if I misstate something, you can correct me? Christian, are we live on this? Thank you. Good evening to all of the parents, concerned citizens, administrators, members of the school board. We've been asked to have a public hearing this evening to discuss some outcomes after the July 25th election. And so we're going to do two parts. The first one will be about transportation, and then we'll stop, we'll have questions, we'll answer any that we can, and then we'll move on to the budget section. So, I should look over here, that way I'll know. So this is my interpretation. This is not the school board's. This is not the Transportation Action Committee's, nor the director or the coordinator of the transportation, Mr. Tatro, who's next to me. But I feel we have two major problems for our transportation system. The first one is underfunding. The second one is the average age of the fleet. On the screen, you can see that we have FY10, what was budgeted, FY11 and FY12 and FY13. And you can see there it went up a little bit in FY11 because money that was available for acquisition of equipment was moved into the operations budget because the operations budget was not going up. The following year it was cut, and the following year, FY13, it was cut yet again. And for approximately 3 years before this, this number stayed static. So there has been no major increases in the transportation budget for the last 7 or 8 years. Expenses, what it actually costs to run the system. FY10, you see it's $1,420,814. It then jumped to $1,625,115 in FY11, and this year, FY12, it was $1,675,633. The reason that this has increased is a number of issues. One of them is called McKinney-Vento. McKinney-Vento is a federal law that requires us, when we have a homeless family with children, to transport children to the school district that they came from. The theory is that the child feels at home in that school system, and therefore they should be able to go back to that system if they wish. and we pay 50% of the transportation, and the district where they came from pays 50%. We calculated that that cost us approximately $162,000 this year. Now, we have never gotten any additional funding from the federal government or the state for this, but the Office of the Auditor looked at this after a number of people complained about it and stated that this was an unfunded mandate, and because of the auditor's request for information, the information we provided, as well as other districts, in the state budget that was passed on, I don't know if it was July 1st or June, sometime at the end of June, money was put in, about $11 million was placed in a fund to reimburse districts for the money that they had spent the year before for McKinney-Vento, so that it would be a reimbursement kind of thing, and it would not reimburse us at 100%, but probably around 70%. The town of Wareham is prepared to get, according to something I got from Mr. Sweat today, approximately $125,000 from McKinney-Vento. However, that money will come directly to the town. So we, in fact, yesterday at a transportation action committee, had a vote, and it passed that we will go forward to town meeting asking for that $125,000 to be added to the non-net, which is the transportation budget. Now, the reason we need that is that when you look at what it costs to run the transportation system and what it has been funded at, the deficit has been growing for 3 years. And the deficit has been growing because the age of the fleet requires us to do more maintenance and more repairs to keep our buses on the road. That's one reason. McKinney-Vento is another reason. Special education in district and out of district that we have no control over. It's all controlled by IEPs, so that when you put McKinney-Vento and special education in district and out of district, it costs approximately more than half of the total cost for transportation. That is not within we have no control over that. We have to transport those children, and that cost is a fixed cost. And the exact numbers is that we have $860,912 was for the special needs transportation in district, out of district, and homeless McKinney-Vento. Regular ed transportation, the big buses, the 23 big buses, that was $814,720. So as you can see, the deficit continues to grow. We brought in more money to our revolving account that then went to offset. But even after using that to offset the difference, we still had a deficit of $87,000 that we needed to make up. And if we don't make it up, then it means we go to town meeting in October and ask for those bills to be paid. We have not done that at this point. The reason we are here to discuss a proposal to reduce services. The amount budgeted is not enough to pay for the current services provided. The town has not funded a capital plan to replace our aging fleet. The growing end-of-year deficit in transportation can no longer be ignored if taxpayers wish to maintain the current transportation service levels to all students. I'll wait until we get to questions and answers. Solutions to consider is the increase in the appropriation for non-net school spending at fall town meeting by adding the McKinney-Vento funding. As we heard, it's $125,000. This was my own, this was not anybody else's, and I put down that we need to authorize the purchase of 2 new buses at town meeting using the funds raised from the meals tax. Even though that money has been budgeted for this year, then that would have to be put off until FY14, because that money has already been placed into the general budget and is no longer available. Other options. To reduce our services, one way that we can reduce services is to have a 3-tier system with 13 buses on the road instead of a total now of 22, 23 buses. So we currently have a 2-tier system. First thing in the morning, by 7:30, we're dropping off high school and middle school. So to go all across the town, Wareham has a large mass area. 23 buses go around, pick up middle school and high school students, and drop off at both buildings. There is about a 15 to 20-minute hiatus between the time they drop off, and then they go and they pick up our elementary students at the same time. So we have approximately 11 or 12 buses that go to the Deacon side of town and about 12 or 13 buses that go to the Minot side of town and pick up the students and then drop off. If we have a 3-tier system, it means that the 2 elementary schools would have to start at different times, and then secondary, the middle school, would have to start at another time. So whichever way you worked it, if we kept the middle school as the first, as it is now with the high school, then one of the elementaries would be starting at the current time at about 8:15, and the second elementary would have to start at around 9 o'clock. I understand for many people who work, having school not open until 9 o'clock when you have to be at work at 8 o'clock in the morning doesn't work for you. We also talked about another way to raise funds, to charge a nominal fee of approximately $75 per child. We have 3,000 students in the Wareham schools, approximately. It's down to 2,990 students now, but we'll use 3,000 as the number. Well, why can't we charge all 3,000 students? Well, as part of the law for being able to charge fees, if a child is on free or reduced lunch, you may not charge them for transportation to get to school. If they have an IEP for special education, whether it is in district or out of district, you cannot charge them for transportation. So when we looked at the total number of students, there was one other group, elementary children, K to 5, that live farther than 2 miles, you have to transport them by law, and you can't charge them. So the maximum number of people that could be charged would be about 1,000 people. That would bring in $75,000. Now, many people that I have talked to have said, well, if you're charging me, and I have 2 children in my family, and I can drop them off before I go to work, I'm going to save $150, and that's what I'm going to do. So the amount of money that we could actually bring in will be lower than this number. And then we have the issue of the bus driver at the stop with a child who has not paid their fee, is not on the free or reduced, having to make a decision. And we have already said we're not going to leave a child at a stop because of safety issues, and now it becomes an equity issue. You've transported this child without paying, why do I have to pay? So as far as I'm concerned, it is not an equitable situation to do that. But there are communities across Massachusetts that actually charge fees for transportation. So this isn't a new one, but it's something we have not done, and it's something that needs to be discussed. So at this point, I'm open for questions and comments.
I want to make it clear that this is a public hearing, which means we value your comments and your questions. We, most of the time, are up here doing the business of the district. Tonight is not that. Tonight is an opportunity for you to speak and for you to ask us questions and make comments. If we go to this three-tier system and bus fees, there's almost no parent-child associated with the schools that will not in some form be impacted. Changing times of schools, paying fees, not using the bus, it's a very significant decision. And that's why we wanted to hear what you had to say. I also want to stress there is a way to avoid this, which we actually didn't know it was going to exist as of town meeting. We were hopeful, and that is if this McKinney-Vento money, this $125,000, is made available to us, it will cover the deficit that we had this year, even leave a little bit left over, so maybe we can buy a couple of used vans instead of dealing with things that have hundreds of thousands of miles on them. But unfortunately, that does not go to us, and we're in a position where we would have no guarantee until October town meeting, which is a long way into the fiscal year, whether we would be receiving that money. We are already in this fiscal year. We're already, in a less extensive way, operating the bus fleet. So for us to go through all of September and October with our fingers crossed and hoping that that $125,000 would be approved for us without the support of the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen and the people, ultimately, would be a gamble. And we would be, without it, we'd be deficit spending. And that's not acceptable, which means that if we lost in October, we would suddenly have to radically change the transportation system and implement this and perhaps even higher fees. I'm not exactly sure what we would have to do. So we're in a bit of a bind. And that's why hearing from you is so important. I admit that in many respects, what we're giving you are a lot of ugly options. We didn't want this. But the facts are that expenses are rising, revenues have been flat, and keep in mind, we now do, for fiscal year 2012, the one that ended just June 30th, we had 260,000 miles of regular bus transportation, morning and afternoon pickups. We had 437,000 miles of special ed, homeless, and all the other variety of things that do not involve the morning and afternoon pickups. It's now a larger part of the transportation system than what we think of, which is the morning and afternoon pickups. So it's a big deal. And we used to get $250,000 from the state as of about 2005 for transportation. That just stopped. So there's another $250,000 that was taken away from the town to support the transportation system. And finally, I know a lot of people think, maybe hope, I wish it was true, that if we could just hand this over to a private bus company, all our problems would be solved. The only thing I can tell you is I have never seen anything that tells me that's even close to being true. It's off by anywhere from $500,000 or more. It would cost us simply that much more. And furthermore, we even thought maybe we should look at the possibility of giving a piece, the easy piece, the morning and afternoon runs to a private company. And let them, and we'll keep the complicated stuff so that we at least have some buses available for special things like transporting our basketball team to the TD arena for a playoff game, which would be charged by a private company, but we have the buses available to do that. It turns out that Bourne does that for $300 a day per bus and that would cost about $1.3 million if we did it. What are we spending on regular transportation? A little over $800,000. There's a $500,000 difference if we privatized. There is no one on this committee, and I include the superintendent in this statement, who wouldn't love to give this to a private company and just stop having to think about transportation. But I can assure you that if we did it, it would cost us money, and we are all afraid that where that money would come from, which is out of the regular school budget. And so we can't even contemplate doing that because the next part of this hearing, you'll hear about the regular school budget. So I'd like to open it up with any questions, comments, thoughts that you'd like us to hear. We would be grateful for hearing all of them. The microphone is right there. Ma'am, if you don't mind, so that people can hear, because it's not just us who want to hear it, there are people at home who would like to hear your thoughts. A question is fine. And if you don't mind, if you'd identify yourself, that'd be great.
Okay, my name's Holly King, and my first question is, and this doesn't necessarily fall upon me, but you have Wareham childcare both at Deacon's and at Minot. So I assume that that's going to impact, the tiered timeframes would impact them, because you've got parents that have to leave for work much earlier than an 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock time. Have you had any consultation with them at all?
No, we haven't, but that was one of the things today. We had an administrative meeting that was put on the list of things that needs to happen, that we need to have a conversation with them.
Okay, because
Yes.
I assume that's going to also impact their fees that they would then pay.
I suppose it would, yes.
Okay. And then my other thought was, I know you did say about a tiered time, but are the children going to actually be on the buses longer? It'll be the same time frame. Like, for example, I live 3 minutes from Deacon's, but if my children take the bus, they're on there for a half hour coming home. So I elect to pick them up because I have that ability. So they're not going to be necessarily on the bus for an extended period of time.
No, the bus run time would be the same as it
Same.
is now.
It's just going to be at tiered levels.
That's right. So we can
Start times
use-
and end times.
That is correct.
So on the other end, they may be starting at 8 and 9:15, but then they're going to be coming home an hour later as
If they
well.
start an hour later, they'd come home an hour later.
An hour later.
That's correct.
Right, so it's on both ends that parents are going to have to consider that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else that people would like to share or ask? Yes. Sorry,
That happens now and
it will
again.
do that occasionally, but it's easily corrected. Thank you.
Rebecca Benitez Figueroa. Regarding the tier system with eliminating transportation for high school, what happens when you have half days and you have children that are maybe dropped off by their parents, but they're out of school and the parents have gone to work? What happens to these children? They hang at the library. They live up in Shangri-La. They can't get there. So what have you thought about the impact it would have on those parents and those children that in 10th grade or 9th grade and they can't get home? What do they do the rest of the afternoon? And then we have another problem. Have you thought of that?
I have. Yes, it's one of the reasons this is such a difficult situation for the committee. I will say that where there is bus capacity, our intention is to have waivers of the no high school students, drop them off at the middle school and have them walk over to the high school. But that's only based on the assumption that we may have some excess capacity after we picked up the middle schoolers. So, but your point is extremely well taken. We share your concern. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Amy Goodwin. A couple questions. Can you call a special town meeting to move the money to be transferred now? The town meeting, if I said that correctly. Why wait till October?
The short answer is the school committee cannot call a special town meeting. The Board of Selectmen could.
So is that something that would be helpful if we encourage the selectmen to call for an extra town meeting? Not that we all want to go. I mean, I was there for the whole run last time, but if we can move the money, that would be helpful. That would solve a lot of the problem.
Let me say this. Keep in mind that this $125,270 was not in anybody's calculation at the time the budget was put together and approved. It's my opinion, and I want to stress it's just my opinion, that there should not be any question about where that money should go.
Right.
And if we had the support of the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen, it would seem to me, and I don't want to leave out the Finance Committee, it would seem to me that this would be a slam dunk at the October town meeting, because we're not taking away any money from anybody to do this. We're simply taking money that the state envisions would come to us and simply saying, thank you, we will use it to make sure we don't have to do this three-tier system and start charging people for fees. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to say what I'm thinking, which is, if I were a parent, I would write a letter, an email, call the Board of Selectmen, and simply say, I think this is right, I think you should get behind it now, and make sure that the school committee knows that you're behind it, so that we can eliminate all the uncertainty for the parents associated with this issue. Because I assure you that if we got that message from those three people, those three entities, Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and the town administrator, then we would feel comfortable that we could spend the money, even though it wasn't officially here, and then we wouldn't have to do any of this.
So when I thought the money was here, when is the money coming?
I actually asked that question in my telephone calls today. Couldn't get a good answer, but I was told it's coming. You don't have to worry about it. It's been authorized. It's been signed off by the governor. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And they gave me literally the precise amount, $125,270. So I have some confidence that the only issue is whether it goes into town coffers or whether it goes where it was intended to go, which is to reimburse the cost of transporting the homeless children.
And then my other points were, my kids have the availability to go on the school bus because of an incident. I drive both of my children. I don't know how many parents do the same thing. I know 4 personal friends who have done something very similar. Also, just for next year, to please don't break up the school budget, to put it all on as what you need. And if you need $30 million, ask for $30 million. This town does not like to go backwards. They never have. So, you know, I think it would have been passed, is my personal opinion, if we had asked for it at town meeting. That's it.
Absolutely right.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Nicole Allen. I have one question, and I have a couple questions and a suggestion. My first is, if we charge fees for the transportation, does that go directly to the school, or does it go into the town?
Currently, we charge fees for athletics. And
Oh, I
those-
meant, I'm sorry, the 75.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we have experience that when we do charge fees to parents, it does go right in. We deposit it into our revolving account. So that money goes into the athletic revolving account. This would go into the transportation revolving account.
So you wouldn't have to wait, it would be at your disposal, it
that
would
is
go right,
correct.
okay.
That is correct.
And then, my other kind of question is, what about advertising on the buses? I know some, is advertising. I'm thinking of a way to kind of generate new money, instead of everybody kind of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, maybe, corporate sponsors. Like, we have so many new businesses coming into Wareham that maybe the corporate sponsors, or writing grants to corporate companies that maybe can generate some new money coming in.
We have tried the advertising, and when the economy was better, we were able to bring in at the top probably about $15,000 came in advertising. That is down to about $11,000 now that goes into the revolving account, because many of the smaller businesses that had ads, it was $750 for the year. It was too much for them to pay, so we've lost a number of those vendors.
And so how does, if you do the advertisement, how does the word get out to, like, who's kind of spearing that? Like, I mean, is that something maybe somebody like volunteers, parents could get together and really go out there and try? Because everybody wants the same outcome. Everybody wants to make this situation better. And I think we all need to step up as parents, too, to say, you know what, this is the problem. Let's all come together. Instead of bickering back and forth or pointing fingers, let's all get a solution together. And so say you got 10, 15 parents and volunteers that went out into the community and said, listen, we're trying to do this for our children, we're trying to do this for our town, then maybe we can all come together and really, out of the goodness of these businesses' heart, say, okay, let's make this community better and work together. So I'm wondering if maybe that's something that we could kind of...
Perhaps with some of the news coverage that we have tonight in the hall, that an article about this with the form that people could send in to be contacted about advertising would regenerate that particular income and maybe increase it. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we move on to the budget, any other thoughts, comments, or questions on transportation?
Hi, I'm Ann Pearl. I just was wondering if anyone has thought about the impact of dropping kids off now. So if you charge and the parents say no, I know I drop my kids off, and mine at Forest is crazy. And I know I'm going to be starting the high school this year, and I've heard from other parents that dropping off at the high school is absolutely insane as well. So has that consideration come in? Because you're going to have a lot of parents who just say, I'm not paying the fee, I'm going to drop off. So what are we going to do then?
I don't know what the rest of my colleagues have to say about this, but I can tell you that the issue of congestion, Viking Drive, Marion Road, it's, whatever it was, it's going to be a lot worse. We agree with you.
We're well aware of the safety issue. It's why we pay someone to be a traffic crossing guard on Marion Road. That is a very busy roadway in the morning. And with the buses coming out and coming in, as well as parents and the various drop-offs, it does get very busy, and we can back up all the way onto Main Street and beyond. So, yes, I'm well aware of it, and it's one of the considerations why we haven't done this before, because between the drop-offs and the fact that many people won't be able to afford to pay, the amount of money that would actually come in would be very little.
Mine is, you said you have a crossing guard for the high school and the middle school, and I get that, but the elementary levels, I don't know how Deacon's is, but mine at Forest can get backed up all the way to Onset Ave and Depot Street. And it's also a safety issue. So I don't know if I'm just thinking it's something that needs to be thought of at that level as well, because it's going to impact, people are going to say, no, I'm not paying for my high schools, and I'm definitely not paying for my elementaries either.
There are three main issues that this committee has been talking about since this has been an issue, not even this past year, not even this year, but also in past years, when we start talking about some of the options that we have. And, where you see a lot of passion and outrage from members of this committee have to do with three issues when it comes to making this, and there could be a fourth, but one has to do with traffic and congestion. The other one has to do with safety, because there are some children or parents that will say, when they're on that cusp that, and we're not that far away, to just walk to school. And the other one has to do with attendance. So there's been a lot of conversation. I think that when it comes to solutions to those three issues, that's where, it comes to, we're gonna do everything that we can to make sure that we're addressing those three issues, but it's not optimal. I mean, there is no amount of things that we can put in place besides, having, a group of volunteers going around and picking up kids to, or asking for carpooling and that kind of stuff. So there's no perfect answer to the changes that we're looking at right now. But if the question is, are we looking at that and addressing that? We'll have to. We've been talking about it, and we'll have to address each one of those issues, because we're all concerned about those three.
Okay.
Attendance as being one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I just want to acknowledge the fact that I have personally been criticized on behalf of the school committee for the fact that we don't abide by the 2-mile state minimum. In fact, the school committee policy is, I believe, 1 mile. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is 1 mile, and when safety issues have occurred, I suspect even that 1 mile has been violated. The reason is very simple. There is nothing more important to this committee and to the district management, and frankly, I suspect every staff member in the school district, than the safety of these children. And there aren't enough sidewalks, and especially in inclement weather, winter weather, et cetera, to see a child walking on the street just, I think, offends the sensibilities of certainly the bus drivers and everybody associated with it. So we have bent over backwards to provide transportation to children. And candidly, I'm proud that we do it. But unfortunately, there is an expense to it, and we're being confronted with that, and that's why we've asked you to be here tonight. Anything else on transportation? Yes.
Hi there.
Hi.
My name is Carrie Morell. I'm the mother of a boy going into 8th grade and a daughter going into 2nd. I guess I'd just like to say for working parents, I mean, of course, no, we're not willingly wanting to pay, extra fees. I absolutely would, as opposed to a cut in services. I don't have an option to pick up my children after school. I don't, people are saying they'll refuse the fee and drive them. For a 2-parent working family, that just isn't feasible. So, it might not be a favorable opinion, but I'd rather see a fee than, cuts to service.
I have really bad news for you.
Yeah.
The bad news is that the savings associated with cutting the services is far greater than adding the fees, and the fees was going to be on top of the cut in services, not one or the other.
Great, yeah. Okay.
So if we didn't make that clear, I apologize.
Yeah.
But it was in addition to,
Okay.
because we're trying to deal with a deficit that the $75,000 wouldn't cover.
Okay, yeah.
And frankly, as Dr. Rabinovich said, $75,000 is probably the maximum we could
Right.
expect to achieve for all the reasons that people understand.
Right, right.
But thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Rabinovich, why don't you move on to the budget, please?
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm sorry,
No, I just want to ask, should I be signing these?
only if you want to.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay,
No.
thought there was a,
Incidental.
okay. No, you can go, thank you. Okay, thank you. Some of you who are regular attendees at our public hearings on the budget know that this was presented originally in January. Principals began working on this in November. It went through multiple screenings in December with budget subcommittees. In January, it was presented to the Finance Committee in great detail. In fact, it was a full-day presentation with questions and answers. We also, in March, had a full public hearing on this budget where we had the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee present for that. And at all of those various meetings, and for the last 2 years, I've talked about things that needed to change and some initiatives that we've put into place that we believe are necessary in order to close the achievement gap between our students and the state. So we have a new mandated Massachusetts educators evaluation process. This is being implemented across the state, but many districts won't be doing it for 1 more year. Wareham, because we were a grant recipient of our T, as part of that package, both the union and the school department had to sign off saying that we would begin this fall. In fact, we've had 2 days of administrative meetings and a full day of training for our administrators to begin to implement this. And there has been a committee that has been meeting, joint management labor, for 3 years, working out the kinks in this new evaluation system. As part of that, in order to do a thorough evaluation of somebody who was teaching in a classroom, people have to visit that classroom on a regular basis. In the old days where we had one principal and one assistant principal in a building with 700 elementary students and a staff of 60 with paraprofessionals, with custodians, that all of them reported to the principal, and the principal needed to evaluate everyone in that building. For quality control and to have a sphere of influence where people actually know what is occurring and can have a supervisory relationship to try to be helpful in the process of teaching and learning, we needed to do something. And what we began is something called instructional leaders. At each of our elementary schools, the 2 large elementary schools, we began with 2 half-time instructional leaders. So if you take 0.5 times 2, it is 1. So there is 1 FTE, or full-time equivalent, in each one of the elementary schools, and there's 1 FTE in the middle school. That is 3 people for salary purposes that get paid at where they would get paid as a classroom teacher, and there is a stipend of $2,600 that is added to that. Now, through this joint management labor committee and with discussions with the school board, we have felt that this was a necessary part of the instructional leadership of this district in order to carry it out correctly, because we have not been satisfied with what we have and the scores that our students achieve. And that by having a direct impact on classroom instruction, then student achievement should improve. And when we came and we asked for the additional funds, we hoped to be able to increase those half-time positions to a full-time position. That did not happen. As part of the cuts, those extra halves are gone, and we're still with the same half-time, 2 half-time people in both elementaries that we had 2 years ago and had this year. RTI, starting a year ago last summer, we began training our 3rd grade teachers. We put them through a 36-hour course offered by Teachers 21 on response to intervention, because it is a structure that allows teachers to, after they do their initial presentation and instruction to the class, to break the class down into children that have mastered the concept, that can move ahead, and find children that haven't mastered it and need a second dose of instruction, which we call Tier 2. And if we have children that don't get it after that, we have something known as Tier 3. And using some of our special education staff as part of that process, and using grant money that we received, we were able to provide that 36-hour course now for all elementary teachers, K through 6. 6 is in the middle school. They have also received the training. But the last part that has to happen is that beyond the training, we then had a coach from that same Teachers 21 that comes in and observes the teacher implementing this and works with grade levels of teachers to help them, any questions they have about implementation, if they see that they may not be doing it exactly the way it was presented, to help them do it a different way. It is quality control. And anybody that works in industry knows that you need quality control. That's what the coaching is about, and to give teachers feedback about what they're doing so that it happens. You just don't give people a course and expect them to go in and implement it. There needs to be this second part where they get feedback and coaching. And that is in this budget and will continue to be in this budget because of the investment that we've already put in by educating all of our teachers, K through 6, with RTI. We can't just say, well, we're going to stop it, we're going to drop it. We have to continue because we believe it will make instruction better and student performance will improve. And that's what we're in the business of, is educating children. The curriculum revision and articulation. Believe me when I tell you, it wasn't any bright idea of anybody in this school system that said, let's revise all the curriculums and have to go out and buy all new books. Something called the Common Core was adopted by Massachusetts along with 48 or 47 other states as a national set of frameworks. That then had all of the state frameworks change so that we at the local level had to go in and change all of our curriculums. And first it was English language arts and literacy, then it was mathematics, and now it is science. It's all changing. We have done the curriculum revision in English language arts. We have done the math revision K through 8, but we are working this summer and through the fall to do our high school math curriculum. That takes time. It takes committees. We have to pay people outside of their day to come together to work on that. Data collection and analysis. As part of our RTI system, we want groups of teachers who are at a common grade level. So let's say Minot Forest grade 3 teachers have a planning period that they get together and look at all of the students in grade 3, and then they look at data that shows which children have mastered certain skills and which children need additional remediation, additional instruction, or maybe they need to be moved into a more advanced because they've already got it. The way you do that is to have benchmark exams along the way while we're teaching the curriculum, put those into something known as Inform, and then allow our teachers to use the data. The state came up with this data warehouse that was supposed to do all of us for this. Unfortunately, it didn't work. So local districts had to come out and get their own software packages to do this. And it is aligned with our Power School, and it is another thing that we began last year but need to continue to implement so that it gets to full implementation. For any initiative, any change that goes on in any kind of an organization, you need to implement it fully in order to see the gains that will come from it. As I talked about, and this is a slide I've showed the last couple years, we have 2011 in here. After the scores come in, at the end of August, beginning of September, we will have 2012. These are the composite CPIs. And so you have the state in ELA with the dark purple. The light blue is Wareham. You can see that we were approaching it in 2009. We've now, the gap has widened. And this is if you take all students and you take an average of their CPIs. And then we look at mathematics, and we see the state in red, and we see Wareham in a goldenrod color. And that is unacceptable that our students are not at least at state average. Unacceptable. That's why we need to do things differently, because what we have been doing has not paid dividends to us. Wareham versus the state average in spending. So if you take what people spend above or below what the net school spending minimum amount that the state says should be spent on that school system, and we take a look in FY11, the state average was about 13% above that number. In Wareham, we were at about 2% above that number. And you can see that there were years, many years, from 97 to about 2006, where we were below the state average. There are a number of ways of looking at the budget. This is a one-page budget that breaks things down into the major account areas, of which there are approximately 9 of them. And if we go through this, you'll see that the largest amount of money is in instructional services, and that's where the majority of the cuts were made. What you can't see by looking at this is that under district leadership and administration, the school committee expenses, including legal fees, superintendent salary, assistant superintendent, there isn't one, the business and finance department, as well as secretarial services for the superintendent's office and the business office, and the technology office are all in this one line item. So when it looks like district leadership and administration, that is not just the superintendent's office, that are all of those that I mentioned. When we look at instructional services, we have district-wide leadership, we have curriculum director, department heads, principal's office, principals and assistant. So within there, one of the cuts that was made that will be detailed on the next slide was an assistant principal that we cut at the elementary school. Building technology, home instruction, the extended year for special education is involved in that. Classroom teachers, teacher specialists, K-12 department heads, PT speech salaries, substitutes, paraprofessionals, library and media career, and so forth. So there are a lot included in each one of those large accounts. If we look at what I call the 2000 account, instructional services, these are the cuts that were made. So 2210, an assistant principal was cut. In 2305, classroom teachers were cut. There was an adjustment with the PT and speech salaries, an adjustment for the amount of money budgeted for substitutes, an adjustment for paraprofessionals. Professional development was cut yet again. And because we thought we would be able to find a way to get textbooks and technology, the textbook were zeroed, and that was put into a debt exclusion. And so all of that money was cut from the budget. Technology, all of the additional money was cut. And then under psychologists, we had adjustment as well. So all of that adds up to $1,876,843. What's the impact? I sat with the 2 elementary school principals in my office and our directors. We went through what it means next year with the actual numbers of children who were currently there on July 26th. I put the date there because I'm aware at one elementary school we had an increase in grade 3, and in the other elementary school we had an increase in grade 5, just within a day or two. Now, So I will run this again once things seem to settle, but until school opens, people come in and people go out, and that happens every year. So as of the 26th, you can see that our kindergartens, and this is part of the full-day kindergarten, that we now have 6 full-day kindergartens in both schools. I don't believe that that number is low. I believe that that number is right on target, given that we're talking the first experience for school for children. And children come in at all different levels and ranges of ability when they come into kindergarten. Grade 1, 24.5 at Minot, 22.8 at Deacon's. Grade 2, 27.25 at Minot and 22 at Deacon's. Grade 3, 25.2 at Minot, 29.25 at Deacon's. Grade 4, 24.25 at Minot, 28.75 at Deacon's. And grade 5, 26.5 at Minot and 29.75 at Deacon's. At the middle school, where we reduced our large reduction, not this year, but the year before, where 9 or 10 teachers left the middle school. We have grade 6 this year has 25 students, grade 7 has 25 students per class, and grade 8 has 28.75. The high school schedule is not completed at this time. However, Mr. Palladino has told me that he is looking at study halls again, where we had just last year got to eliminate study halls.
Dr. Sylvia?
Dr. Rabinovich, just a clarification. These are real numbers now. These are actual numbers of our enrollment for next year. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct.
Actual numbers.
Actual numbers.
Thank you.
Mike? When this all settled out, were the cuts evenly spread out? Because I know there was a disparate impact at one point. I think at the Deacon's where more teachers were impacted. Was that corrected?
Let me explain. At both elementary schools and the high school, each site lost 6 teachers. The impact that you're talking about is that the seniority list, so when you, let's say there were 12 elementary teachers that had to be pink slipped. When you go up the seniority list, more of those teachers resided at Deacon's. So Deacon's did not lose more positions, but they did lose more of their staff because more of their staff was younger and had been with us a shorter time than on the Deacon's side. When people retire and you hire new people, they go to the bottom of the seniority list, and we went up a certain number of positions.
And nothing's been done to adjust that, I take it?
By adjust it, yes. As part of this meeting, 3 teachers from Minot Forest will be getting letters from me, transferring them to the Deacon's school.
So then will it be even 6 and 6?
Yes, exactly. The losses are 6 and 6, exactly the same.
Okay, and is that reflected in that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So these numbers wouldn't change?
It is possible that one grade level at Deacon's will go down because that person hasn't been placed yet.
Okay.
And it was a matter of room, and we were going back and forth between both principals, and it wasn't settled. So that's why I have the date on here.
Okay, so for the most part, it won't change this chart.
One grade level at Deacon's will change to a lower number than it currently is now. One of those that are at 29 will go down to approximately 26.
Okay.
As when we were talking about the override to bring teachers back. And a number of people had difficulty with the idea about 780,000 versus the number of cuts that you actually saw here, 1,300,000. And that's because there were positions that were cut that we did not ask to bring back. So the assistant principal's position at Hammond was not part of the 780 to bring back. That was going to be cut one way or another. The department head of guidance at the high school was a cut no matter what. So in other words, we didn't ask to make up everything in our needs-based budget. We only asked to bring back classroom teachers. That would affect class size. So that's why there is a difference between that 1,300,000 and the 780,000. So as part of that cut, since we cut the assistant principal at Hammond and we cut a custodian within the district, what we needed to do, and we couldn't say we were going to do it until after the vote, and we knew that those teachers were gone, is that now we had the classroom space at Minot, not a lot, just exactly enough space to take the kindergartens that were at Hammond and move them back to Minot, so that we wind up with 2 elementary schools, both K-5, rather than having a kindergarten center at Hammond, which was our plan if we had done a renovation and expansion of Minot. The plan was to bring them back because we have a wooden structure that is a lovely building and has lots of history, but needs lots of work if it is going to be used as an elementary school. The outside of that building has lead paint. Last summer, we spent about $40,000 doing the inside of the building where students were going to be, but the outside of the building still has lead paint, and for us to continue using that building, we would have to either encapsulate all of that, take off all of the paint, and anybody that deals with that kind of work with lead paint knows it's a very expensive project. It's one of the reasons why the Mass School Building Authority was willing to place Minot on the list, because of the combined issue between Hammond and the Minot Forest School. Consequences. We don't have any money to buy any new textbooks. Some people can say you shouldn't have gambled, you shouldn't have put it on, you should have asked for it at town meeting. Lesson learned. Larger class sizes, which you saw here today, which we said would happen. Falling further behind with instructional technology. We had a great presentation here with iPads. The people were excited and wanted to expand that because they felt it was good for children. Not able to buy any new ones, not able to expand it. We have infrastructure issues we have to deal with. Some people in this town are avid sports fans. We asked for a nominal amount of money to replace a roof. I will be talking with the high school principal about moving the games out of the high school and perhaps to the middle school gym. That will have to set some other people that use that gym, but I don't see another way out of it. I don't know where I would get $110,000 to go repair that roof. The achievement gap continues to mirror the funding gap. I'm sorry that I keep saying it, but I believe that it is the true problem. Minimum funding is not adequate. At a future school committee meeting, I was asked by one of the school committee members, Mr. Flaherty, to explain a little bit about Chapter 70 and the minimum contribution of the town. And I will go through that at our next meeting and try to show how, according to the formula by the state, the minimum contribution of the town should have gone up $400,000 for us to meet our minimum net spending number. Our number went down $250,000 from last year. That's $700,000. That would about equal those classroom teachers. I got a phone call from the MSBA wanting a letter from us telling them how the election went and telling them that what I believe, would we be able to get any vote before November's date, or are we taking ourselves off the list to then have to reapply at another time? And as I was told clearly, just because you were put on the list this time, every time you're looked at separately, there is no guarantee that we would be put back on the list if we reapplied next year or the year after. In fact, my recommendation to the board would be to go for the vote first before you make application. That way, you know you have the funding to move ahead.
Yes.
Timing-wise, didn't we have an opportunity for a second bite at the apple this time around?
We have to have a vote by the public by November. So if it hadn't passed town meeting, we would have had another opportunity in October if we had had a vote first. Some districts go and do the vote first, and then they come to town meeting. We happen to go to town meeting first. But the drop-dead date, so to speak, is November.
Thank you.
The NEASC report that we spent some long hours in this room going through, Mr. Palladino presented it. There were accommodations and there were problems that were brought forward, challenges. One of the challenges was the high school roof. The other one, if you read the report fully, says if you cut any staff within that building, you must file a report within X number of days, and that may change your status. I fully expect the high school accreditation to be put on warning status because of the lack of staff at that school. That is a consequence of what has occurred. I'm now available for questions.
Excuse me. Mike, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Excuse me. Correct me if I'm wrong, I thought we were on warning status and we were going to slip into probation.
You may be correct. I may have
You used the wrong
Dr.
word.
Sylvia is shaking his head, so you are correct.
All right, thank you.
Entirely possible we'll be on probation. Actually, it's entirely likely.
I didn't, when I was putting this together, Monday, actually Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I've been full-day meetings, so this was put together Monday, and when I didn't have the time to do the extra research.
And just to be clear, once we get put on probation, that becomes public record. That's on the NEASC website. I mean,
Absolutely.
anyone looking to move to this town could see that.
Yes, sir.
One more piece of information, and then I'll open it up for questions. I already mentioned that McKinney-Vento was money that was designated for the town after town meeting. There are two other pieces of financial good news for the town. One is general aid to the town was increased by approximately $120,000, and Chapter 70, which is specifically education-related aid, was increased by about $115,000. This will come into the town. It will not automatically, the $115,000 will not automatically come to the schools. obviously, especially considering the results of the special election, we think we have something good that we could do with that $115,000, and we'll be asking for the support of the Board of Selectmen, the Town Administrator, and the Finance Committee. What will we do with that $115,000? I don't know. I can think of a lot. But it's one of those problems. Do you fix a room? Do you fix a roof? Do you buy textbooks? Do you hire teachers? This committee has not begun to consider what to do with that $115,000, and we haven't been promised that we will get the $115,000. I just give it to you in full disclosure of what is out there and one of the issues that will be facing this committee between now and October, when we will be undoubtedly asking for that money. I will now be, yes, Mike.
Mr. Chair, I expressed this at the last meeting that I was surprised it just wasn't automatic where this is, money that it was intended to go. And especially with the Chapter 70 money, I thought there were only certain things that could be spent on. Like I thought we couldn't use it for buses, for example. It had to be used toward education. So can you explain how that works?
There's an, I think you'd call it an accounting term, called fungible, which basically means that, money's money. It can go a lot of different places, and just because an accountant says, or a piece of legislation says, this is what we expect you to use it for, doesn't mean that necessarily it doesn't go to the town and then get dispersed based on the wishes of town meeting. So keep in mind, this is ultimately the decision of town meeting, and once again, it's money that we'll be fighting for, but there's nothing automatic. And by the way, Dr. Rabinovich pointed out, you saw that sloping line. It is quite possible that when all of the accounting is done, that we will be falling below minimum. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Rabinovich. That we will fall below minimum for FY13, or actually FY12, and FY13 would be even worse. The consequences of that are also not clear. So there's lots of things that the state does and mandates, but in the end, it's up to town meeting and the town to govern itself. Dr. Sylvia?
Mr. Chair, through you, just a quick story, if I could.
Please.
I've got two daughters in education. I've got friends all over the state that are in education, and I've been around for a long, long time. I had a conversation with a retired teacher that I was very friendly with in another district in a town, much like Wareham. Pretty much the same kind of demographics. And we were talking about McKinney-Bento, and we were talking about Chapter 70. And they were also aware that they were going to get an increase in this town on McKinney-Vento and Chapter 70. They don't have to bring it to town meeting. The Board of Selectmen said, and the Finance Committee in that town said, that money automatically goes to the school department. And I said to myself, wow, wouldn't that be refreshing in Wareham? Thank you.
Once again, the committee is happy to hear your questions and comments, and hopefully we'll have some good answers for you if you ask us some questions. Is there anybody who would like to ask a question? Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Nicole DiPasquale. I just had a couple of questions to clarify some things. You spoke earlier in your briefing at the beginning about the ILs and that you've invested this time and you have to see it through. So my question is, how long have you invested time in these ILs and whatnot? Just to be clear, in other words, how long have you invested into it to see if it's working or not? Have we given enough time?
This is the second year, is that correct?
We've only done it 1 year.
All right, so this year is the second year.
Oh, so it's new,
Yes,
quite new.
it was new in last year's budget.
And it's state mandated?
No, what's mandated is the new evaluation system.
Oh, okay. And then I just wanted to clarify something, just around town and whatnot. This last thing on the slide was about going into warning that we're most likely to, or to probation. The NAE?
NEASC, yes.
New England Association of Schools and Colleges.
Okay, exactly what is that, and does it matter? I mean, clearly, obviously, it's got to matter because you guys are bringing it up, but for us layman folks, why does that matter?
I'll try to answer it, and Dr. Sylvia can correct me. The accreditation, schools, most high schools go to this organization as the accrediting bureau so that their diplomas, when they're looked at by colleges and universities, have a particular value. Schools that are accredited are valued more than schools that are not. Dr. Sylvia, anything else you would like to add to that?
It's just like if you go to an unaccredited college and you try to get into med school.
It's huge, then.
It's huge.
It's huge. Okay, so it does, okay, fair enough, thank you.
And just another comment on that, we just had the nonprofit that I work at, we were just having a conversation about this, and somebody brought up NEASC as an example. At the nonprofit that I work at, we work very, very hard to be able to get ratings by Charity Watch, by Charity Navigator, all of those. When we get those ratings, then there are things that automatically come to us. There are donors that say, you know, we're automatically, it's this automatic that when you're on this list. And NEASC was brought up as it's what schools are valued by. And so NEASC is like the top charity raters in our country right now, doing that for school systems. And that's the reason why it's not set by us. It's actually state set, you know, all across, that is the accrediting board for schools. And so it's important for us to be on it.
Okay, thank you.
I'll give you a comparison, because my background is healthcare. If there is an organization, there's an organization called JCHO, Joint Committee on Health Care Organizations. It used to be Joint Committee on Hospitals, but they expanded it. There isn't a hospital in the country that doesn't want to be JCHO accredited, because as soon as you lose that accreditation, people think, gee, the quality of care is going to be that much less, and I'll go to another hospital. That's exactly the typical reaction you would have if you lost that accreditation for health care. It is, frankly, very similar in education. You want to go to, and by the way, the people who come to do the accreditation, they're not state bureaucrats. They're not regulators. They're peers. They're people who come from all over other hospitals and educational organizations, and they're doing a service. It's essentially peer review. So I find that particularly meaningful. It's true in healthcare. It's true in education. So this is not just another alphabet soup acronym that you can forget about. It's really meaningful. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Shannon Dixon. My daughter was supposed to be going to Hammond School in September. What is the future for Hammond School? What is going to be done with that?
At this point, because we do not have a custodian for the building, because we do not have an assistant principal for the building, the students will be moved to Minot Forest, and the school will not be used at this point. And it will be a discussion at the school board whether or not it can be used for other purposes or whether it should be mothballed in order to save the heating costs and electricity costs as well.
That was my other question. Where is the money that was used to maintain that school going to be put? Will that help our budget problem?
It may. I mean, believe it or not, the heating cost there, I think I heard today, was about $16,000. It's not as much as I would have thought it was going to be. I'm not sure about electricity, but you know, it is possible that all of the funds together that we save from the operation could be a teaching spot.
Okay, and I live about 3 houses away from that school. Is it going to turn into just another dilapidated building and onset? Are the grounds going to be continued to be maintained? My children play there daily, you know, mowing the grass, things like that. It's a staple in our community.
As long as the school system retains the building, that it will be maintained. I can't answer if it's given back to the town, what will occur.
Okay, my last question is,
Can I stress on this
Yes.
answer? What Dr. Rabinovich is saying has not in any way, shape, or form been discussed with the school committee.
Okay.
So this may be a proposal, it may be something that's ultimately approved, but it is something that needs to be brought to the school committee.
Okay. And what can we do as a community, as parents, to assure that that money, that $125,000, is brought back to the school system and not just put into the town budget? How can we call, do anything to get an earlier town meeting than October, a petition or anything?
If I can, just for a second, about the earlier town meeting. I understand the necessity for wanting some sort of assurances that funds will be available so that we can make the decision about continuing transportation the way it is. As far as having an earlier town meeting, there are a number of deadlines that have to occur. I already have, for the October town meeting, that I have to turn in warrants before the end of August. So I really don't think that, and I don't pretend to know all the laws. Mrs. Silva would know more of it as the town clerk, but I don't believe we'd be able to pull that off with all of the timelines.
Okay, but is there anything we can do at the town meeting in October as parents or as a community to
The short answer is vote for it.
vote for it?
But, and that's ultimately the most important thing. But my concern is always the fact that if you go into town meeting and the political leadership of the town is not unified behind something, then it's a gamble, because the average citizen who is just trying to keep their head above water with all the other things that they're involved in will look up and hear all the speeches, and if they're all saying the same thing, then it's an easy vote to say, yeah, I think we ought to do that. But if there's a division among the political leadership about what the right thing to do is, then frequently people will say, gee, I guess I'll vote no because we'll just keep the money for free cash or whatever. Mm-hmm. So my concern is, can the political leadership get on the same page over the next few weeks about what's going to happen to not just the McKinney-Vento money, but also the Chapter 70 money,
Right.
so that we can operate the schools from day one, which is coming very quickly,
Yes.
knowing that that money is highly likely to be approved because it's new money and it's not spoken for as a part of the budget already.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To that last point you made, Mr. Chair, when is the next meeting of the Transportation Action Committee?
Thank you, Christian, yes.
Monday at 4:30, and I don't think you have it open for public participation at the beginning, but maybe you might perhaps consider that, to have the public, let the committee know, that they support that the schools receive the McKinney-Vento money. Just something to think about.
Well, the good news is that we actually had a motion made and passed at the last Transportation Action Committee. So there's really not any great need to bring it back up because we've already passed a motion. On the other hand, I know there's research being done. We would like to get unanimity on the committee. And if that research gives the people who are uncertain about their vote or voted against it more comfort, then I'd be happy to bring it up.
That's exactly where I was going with that.
But understand that committee is an advisory committee.
True.
And ultimately, it's the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee and the School Committee. I know that sounds like a lot of committees and a lot of people, but we can talk to each other, that have to be on the same page. And if we get on the same page, then I think citizens will have a comfort level that what we're asking them to vote yes on is the right thing to do. Yes.
I'm sorry, just along that lines. Is there, can we make a request on the next Finance Committee meeting as well as the next Board of Selectmen meeting? I know the agendas fill up fast, but for us to not present because the information is already there, but we could provide information up front, but then ask to be on the agenda to actually have a conversation about it, just to address questions that they might have at their meetings. I'll be so bold to even ask for a vote at those committee meetings on whether they would support the money coming, but I know that could be a long shot, but at least that we're sitting in front of the committee members, even if it's just one or two of us, or the superintendent and the chair or someone else here, to talk about those two funding pieces and answer questions directly.
I think it's an excellent suggestion. Now that we've got a vote of the Advisory Transportation Committee, I think it would be totally appropriate to go to those bodies and see if we can move it forward, yes.
Okay. So you're-
Sorry.
That's
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you for your patience.
That's okay. I want to actually go back to the accreditation, because I was on their website, and I have a couple questions in regards to what I had read. That term was very new to me, and in talking to other parents, it seemed to be the same for them. But am I correct in understanding that that accreditation goes back to 1960? Is that correct? Because that's what they have on their website, and that it was reviewed in 2011. And most other towns, it looked as though the same was, like, I saw 1955, 1962. So that's not when we got accredited. That is a fairly new
It
accreditation.
might be the original accreditation date.
But hold on, the superintendent can address it.
In other words, it started, whatever that earlier date, 1960, was the first time that the school was accredited. Every
first
10
time.
years, there's a reaccreditation that they look at everything in total.
Okay.
And then there is a midpoint at a 5-year point that there are questions, and I think they may also come. But
Yeah,
it's
I
every
saw
10
many,
years you have to
many
do it.
review years were 2003, 2004 for I basically just looked at some local towns that surround us to see where they fell. I did see a couple that were, as you said, on probation. Now, my next thing was, it's not just the loss of the teachers that impacts that. I noticed that the roof could also impact that. The textbooks, there was probably 12 or 13 boldface items that they listed that will impact that accreditation.
And most of them have to do with resources and funding.
Yes, okay, all right, but it was originally 1960. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Diane Russo. My daughters, one is going into the middle school and one is a sophomore at the high school. And my concern is with the consequences. Looking at the high school roof, you mentioned here that the high school basketball maybe need to be moved. Now that is not addressing gym class or volleyball or any other uses. That's just one concern. What are your thoughts about that as far as the requirements for that go?
If we have water intrusion that is coming through, I mean, last year, if you recall, we put a tarp up there and we made some repairs. But if we have water coming through, then anytime it is raining and water is coming through, we will have to move gym classes, or we will have to, it won't just be basketball, it will be volleyball or anybody else that
Everybody else,
plays
right.
sports in that gym.
But as far as the gym class themselves, the ones that they have to go to as part of their course schedule?
They would still have the course. For instance, in the fall, many of those classes are held outdoors. There are other facilities within the building. There's a weightlifting suite and so forth that they have some of their phys ed classes in. So if it rains, they will have to move that class. And it is possible that they may have to be in a classroom dealing with health and other parts of the curriculum.
Okay. My second concern is about the NEASC and about going on probation. My daughter was a freshman last year. She maintained a 4.0 average through her entire freshman year, and she was in all honors. Concern is coming from her. If this high school gets put on probation and there's consequences of that, what's going to happen to these kids who have worked their tails off day in and day night, have cut their social lives and put everything into their school? This is her number one priority. We've got to tell her that her school is not going to be accredited, and it's going to take a risk of where she's going to get into college. That's just a thought, and I know you guys are kind of all on the same page about that, but this is actually, I'm speaking for my daughter, who asked me to say that.
As an answer, the best we can, there is a period of time, once we report, they will then send us a letter. They will give us a period of time to try to remediate this. Okay. I am sure we're not the only district or high school that has had financial issues in town, and that we will come back to town meeting and look to take care of these issues.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Amy Goodwin again. I have a question about the accreditation. Is that only in this probation because of the roof?
There are other factors.
No, there were other things as well that were mentioned. The technology, textbooks, number of staff. There were other issues, resources that were mentioned as part of that report.
And then my other question is a silly statement, but the 700 of us who voted yes, is there any means for you to accept our money anyways? Because there's 700 times at least 70, if everybody rounded it up to 100. Do you have any means to take in our money? Those people who are going to pay half-day kindergarten, they're not going to pay half-day anymore. I mean, are you able to take our money and put it towards the school? Because I have 2 kids. There's $200.
That is very generous of you. At any time, we do have organizations, we have parents, we have citizens that do donate on occasion for a particular reason, and that money goes for that reason. Some of you may recognize that at the East School, we have a new playground.
Right.
An anonymous donor dropped off a check for $20,000 for that purpose, and that was used, and we now have a new playground. So
if they send their checks, if it says roof, you can put it towards the roof?
Yes,
and
ma'am.
if it says books, you can put it towards the books?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Frank Heath. I'm going to use some technology that we don't have here at the high school. All right. Some questions come up about who the NEASC is. I want to quote from Chapter 41, Section 108L, which has to do with career incentive pays for certain positions. I just hit the wrong key. I got a problem now. What happens is that basically the people have to go to college classes or accredited community colleges, et cetera. All right, on every credit adds up and eventually gives them some incentive pays. And also, it could be for their college degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, et cetera. The qualification by the state is all semester credits and degrees shall be earned in an educational institution accredited by the New England Association of Colleges and Secondary Schools or by the Massachusetts Board of Education. I think the organization has a high degree of credibility and we need to pay attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question that bothers me. Why are we cutting so many teachers? What other departments are being cut? Administration or whatever. I have no problem. I don't want people to lose their jobs, but the one part that you're cutting is the part that impacts the children more than any other department you can do. So why are we cutting so many teachers? Are we cutting any other places, not just not funding positions, but what other cuts have you done? That's because nobody else impacts the children more so than the teachers.
Now, through the course of probably the last 10 years, administration in this district has been cut. At one point, we had a director of technology, we had a director of transportation, we had a director of fields and grounds. We no longer have the director of technology. We don't have the fields and grounds. Our fields and grounds department at one point was 5 people. It is down to 2, run by a foreman and 1 other worker. We have cut everywhere that we can cut. The administrations at the schools need to be at the level that they are at so that we can run safe schools for our students. And with all of the state mandates that come through with curriculum revision, with special education law, and so forth, we need what we have. If you look on the, there are folks that say go to the state website, and if I had internet capability here and wireless, I would go on for you, and you check out under the total spending per district, per pupil spending by category, you will see that Wareham's administration spending is less than most other districts. So believe me when I tell you we have cut everywhere that we could. supplies, any place that we could. It's just got to that point that there isn't any more places to cut. And the majority of the budget is in teacher salaries.
Don't run. That's okay.
Mr. Sylvia, you had mentioned earlier about your friend that you were talking to, where it was just with the town, with the Chapter 70 money. It blows my mind that something that is supposed to go to education could possibly not. I just still can't wrap my head around that.
It was both of them, the McKinney-Vento and the Chapter 70. They just voted, said there's no reason to bring it forward to town meeting, we're just gonna do it, because that's where it belongs.
How can we, as parents and the rest of the public, how can we just make that happen? Do we have to write our selectmen? I mean, exactly.
That is certainly something that you could consider.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
as a way of trying to answer. When we vote a number at town meeting, and the number was $25,050,000, let's call it, that isn't all that is spent on education. There is another part of that which is called in-kind costs. So when there's unemployment costs,
Right.
when there is health insurance costs, health insurance for retired teachers, all of that is counted towards net school spending. So the total number that is actually spent is closer to $30 million. So if the town's total income coming in is about $60 million, we spend about $30 million of that. Now, the state gives us, in Chapter 70, approximately $12,170,000. They're going to give us another $100,000. But, so we get, the town has to contribute beyond that. So when Mr. Sweat talked about fungible, you really have to look at the total amount of income to the town off the cherry sheet, the total amount of expenses off of it. And we get more than what the Chapter 70 is. We do get that money plus other money. And one of my hopes in next year, and God forgive me, but I'm already thinking about fiscal 14. But we've done two things that are going to increase the Chapter 70 money and the amount of money that the town is going to have to contribute. One of them is there's going to be less money spent on health care because of the number of people that aren't here. That money is part of that total $30 million. So if it doesn't go out as an in-kind expense, then it needs to come in as part of our budget to be spent on classrooms. So that's one area where our budget will increase next year. And the other part of it is, by going to a full-day kindergarten program, children that were paying tuition were only counted, the state only reimbursed us 50% of Chapter 70 money. We now will begin to get 100% of that Chapter 70 money starting in fiscal 14. Both of those should add, in my estimation, somewhere between $700,000 and $1 million to our spending budget.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I just want to say, to answer your question also, that I don't like to usually buy into pitting the schools against the town. We all, right, no, I know that you're
Yeah.
not, I'm saying that for myself, that we've gone through a really hard budget cycle. I mean, that the town is across the board, and we've heard it time and time again that there's no money, and so I get that. When it comes to these two pieces of funding, this isn't budgeted. It is asking, what is the reason why it shouldn't go to the schools? I can understand that there are a million ways that that money can be spent, absolutely, but it's the intention of that money coming. And the intention of those, one goes to reimburse for transportation costs for the homeless children that we are transporting outside of our town, and the other has to do with going to the Chapter 70 funding. I would want to know what else would that be spent for when, again, the intention is towards us? So I think as a citizen, those are the questions that I would ask of the leaders that will be making that decision, is, you know, why wouldn't you have it come to the schools?
Convince me otherwise, right?
Convince,
right.
convince me, right,
Right,
convince
right,
me too,
fair
right.
enough.
I have a first grader. I have a child that's going into first grade, and so as a parent, that's what I would be asking. Why
Right.
wouldn't it?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mike?
Dr. Rabinovich, get back to the full-day kindergarten. Now, we started that this year.
That's correct, except the Chapter 70 money is based on the October 1 report of the year before. So
Okay, but
our money this year is based on October 1 of 2011.
but we're funding. How much did we get to fund that this year?
We got some additional money in the grant of about $20,000.
And with the $20,000, we're not. All we got was $20,000, but with that now we don't have to charge, and we can have full-day kindergarten. And
But as part of, you had to buy into, and we brought it before the school board, we had a vote to
Right.
go for the full-day kindergarten, because educationally, it is a better program for our students.
I mean, I've got the sheet. I've got it memorized practically, but I thought we were getting that this year. We're not. We're getting it next year.
We're getting the 20,000 extra in the grant this year, but the additional Chapter 70 money will come the following year. We do get a savings on transportation because we don't have to deliver the half-day students home and pick up the half-day. So, and I have figured that at about a $20,000 savings as well.
All right. So I mean, did we hire or rehire 2 teachers for this?
There were 2 teachers that were rehired, which would have been half-time positions, but have now are a full-time position.
But now they couldn't have been $20,000. That's where my disconnect is.
We probably had to spend more than what we made this year as an investment in future income coming in, yes.
Okay.
If there are no other comments or questions, let me close with just my own personal thoughts about this situation. I don't want anybody leaving this room thinking that this is a school problem. It's a town-wide problem. There are lots of issues throughout the town where difficult choices have had to be made. Yes, there are 2 buckets of money, the Chapter 70 money and the McKinney-Vento money, that I feel strongly, because it's new money that was not anticipated as part of the April town meeting budget process and approval, that we should be entitled to. But there are extraordinary demands throughout the town and not enough resources. And the most obvious one is there's a capital budget that is so many millions, there's not even any point in talking about how big it is, and we have no funding for it. So how did we get into this situation? Like so many other towns, we got into it because revenue hasn't kept up with the needs of the community. But specifically, the school got into this situation because we weren't in this situation as recently as, well, certainly 10 years ago, we were in fine shape. And it's just been gradually getting worse and worse over the last decade. And the reason is a very simple one. The state legislature has failed to update the formula that determines how much a town like Wareham gets. It is literally that simple. This isn't going to make you feel any better, but I don't want you to be having villains in your mind when you leave here and thinking that there are villains in this town. I don't think there are villains in this town. I think the villain is a state legislature that literally has a committee that has something called an adequacy study that they can't get out of committee. So if you want to know what I would like you to do, yes, you can call your Board of Selectmen and your town administrator and your finance committees, and we'll be working with them to try and get them on the same page for those 2 buckets of money. But really, call your state representative, call your state senator, Tell them to get that adequacy study out of committee, because that's what's necessary to fix the state formula that is costing us millions. And until they do that, every year, it's going to be a similar situation like this. That is the problem. And Wareham in particular, for a variety of reasons that I won't bore you with tonight, is getting hurt by that formula more than some towns. That's just a fact. But that adequacy study is in committee. It needs to get out of committee. It needs to get in front of the legislature, and the results of that study should be funded by the legislature, because that's what's needed to properly educate our children. One more bright spot, and that is they just literally passed, I don't know if the governor signed it, but a health care cost containment bill, okay? We know all about Romney Care, or whatever you want to call it, okay? That was to improve access. This is to reduce the costs. If it works, it's a big caveat, but if it works, it's going to save the state, literally they calculated, I think it was something like $150 billion over the next decade or so. Where would I like to see that money go? Guess where? Education, because that's what hasn't been funded while we've been spending a fortune on health care. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. Committee, anything else you'd like to say, or Mike?
Yes. To the point of the Hammond and bringing up, trying to find money here and there to maybe, get a teacher or two or more back. When are we going to have that discussion? Is that the August 8th meeting?
Yes.
Okay, that's where we can
Yes.
really go through things.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
I didn't hear you, Mike.
At the August 8th meeting, that's when we're going to really go through the budget and try to find some more money.
Ken, all set?
No, I just want to echo thanks to everyone that came. It's too bad that the debt exclusions didn't pass, but I've had a lot of parents tell me, what are we going to do? And I said, did you vote? And they said no. And, that's the sad thing, that is a certain percent that get out there and vote. And most of the people that went to the polls were the elderly, and they're on, fixed incomes and things, so it's going to be very hard for them to vote, to have their taxes increase, and I understand that. The transportation is just one part of this whole process. I mentioned it at our last school meeting, and I haven't changed my mind that I know it's a financial thing, but there's no way I could support cutting transportation grades 9 through 12, because I think it's going to be an attendance problem and a lot more issues. One of the parents here spoke about traffic at the schools. That's going to be a nightmare, because as a parent, I think every day I go to work, out of the last 30 days, I've been late 31 times. So I'm always rushing. You're going to have people rushing in and out of the high school, middle school, Deaconess, Minot, whatever, to drop kids off and go about their business. So there are a lot of concerns. I don't know how we fix it. I don't know how we fix the high school roof. You talk about basketball. Wareham basketball is probably, for sports, the biggest revenue generator, followed by football. And if you're going to move that to the middle school, you're going to lose some revenue there. And also, the trickle-down effect is the schools have priority over outside organizations. So if Wareham basketball has to move to the middle school because rain delays or whatever you want to call it, that's going to put a lot of youth programs out on the street and other things. So it's an ongoing battle. But again, I want to thank those that went and supported it. We have to try to figure this out. I wish I had a crystal ball, because the first thing I would do is hire back the 21 teachers. I think when I ran for school committee, I said I will never support cutting teachers, but there's tough decisions the superintendent has to make. There's decisions with Hammond School. Maybe we look at the the Everett building, but even closing buildings, sometimes the savings is $15,000, $20,000. It's really not that great as far as heat and electricity. So we appreciate, as through Chairman Sweat, I think if you have questions and concerns, you are the people that put us up here. And believe me, I didn't realize how tough being on the school committee could be, and it's a lot of tough decisions. But we need your feedback, because the 5 of us have to make a decision on the transportation, and there'll be some people that are comfortable with it and some that aren't. So make sure we get the feedback from you. Thank you.
Dr. Sylvia, you all set?
Again, I want to echo what my former student said. I want to thank everyone for coming. But I just want to assure you that I am committed to this process. When we rolled out the budget and we rolled out a list of contingencies, if the overrides did not pass, we have to have an honest discussion about those contingencies. I share Ken's desire to try to bring back or try to find ways in which you could limit the number of people that will not be in the classroom. I think it's very important. If you took a look at the slides and you saw the class size at the elementary level, but I'm most concerned about the impact on our high school. I do not want to serve on the school committee when a high school loses accreditation. So I think that that's very important to me. I commit to you that I will keep fighting the fight. I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but my passion has not dampened one iota, and so I just promise you that I will do everything within my power to try to soften some of the impact that we're facing for the future. Thank you.
Right. You all set? Rhonda?
Just thanks everyone for being here.
The hearing is closed. Thank you very much.